The great, vaulted dome of the Krill Ascendancy's high chamber did not absorb sound. It seemed to transmute it, bending the fearful whispers of the assembled delegates into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the polished obsidian floor, a subsonic testament to the political and military terror that had gripped the Deathworld Alliance for the last 3 cycles. The chamber itself was a construct of impossible geometries, spiraling upward into a darkness punctuated only by the distant, cold light of the central projection, a rotating, crimson-laced holographic schematic of the Alliance's frontier perimeter, currently perforated by an invisible, relentless spear. Around the circular dais, representatives from the core worlds, the rigid, segmented Krill, the towering, silken-veiled Cathar, the 6-limbed, perpetually vibrating Vex, sat in profound, uneasy silence, their internal biomonitors registering physiological stress levels that approached catastrophic thresholds. They were the architects of the Galactideme Protocol, the foundational treaty that monitored and contained species evolving on high-gravity, hyperdation, death-rated planets, a protocol designed to preempt the very chaos that now stalked their space, manifest in a single, terrifying entity they had designated only as the Void Scourge, a vessel of unknown origin, of impossible speed, and of absolute surgical destructive intent. High Executor Xylos, a Krill of immense political gravity whose 4 optical stalks usually held the cold steadiness of deep space chronometers, now flickered with agitated, irregular spasms. His voice, amplified to fill the cathedral space, was a grinding stone against steel, betraying a stress unprecedented since the last inter-alliance skirmish generations ago. The Void Scourge has transgressed the quarantine line of Sector Gamma-Novan. Again. We have committed the full reserve of the Cathar patrol fleets, vessels rated for deep core predation and high-yield engagement. They were not engaged, they were erased. There was no tactical exchange, merely a sudden, absolute cessation of all signals, spectral and quantum. It does not maneuver, it does not communicate, it simply exists on a vector toward the galactic plane, and everything that intercepts that vector ceases to be. We have confirmed the loss of the Mantle Guard heavy cruiser and its entire complement, not to mention the preceding reconnaissance vessels. A combined organic and technological loss that would cripple a minor stellar polity for a generation. The Alliance's strategic reserves are not limitless. The question before this esteemed body is no longer how to stop it, but what it is, and whether the crisis it represents is the genesis of a far greater, more terrifying systemic failure within our established order. A deep, reverberating chime echoed from the Cathar delegation's tiered seating. Ambassador Lurvana, her multi-layered veils shimmering with a nervous, iridescent light, raised a hand with a gesture of deliberate, ritualistic slowness, demanding absolute attention. The Cathar were the keepers of the deep-time archives, their societal structure predicated on the principle of minimal risk and maximal historical analysis. Her modulated voice, usually a soothing low frequency, was tight with philosophical dread. Executor Xylos correctly frames the question. This entity defies all established physics of both propulsion and engagement. It is not an alliance construct. It is not of the Ascendancy's design. We have cross-referenced the tactical profile against all historical conflicts, all rogue emergent AI threats, all reported dark field phenomenon sightings over the last millennia. The spectral residue left at the site of the Mantle Guard's dissolution, a transient, high-energy signature, is wholly unique. It does not map to any known weaponization of zero-point energy, dark matter manipulation, or even the theoretical weaponization of gravitational wave distortion. It suggests a technological leap so profound it invalidates our entire defensive matrix. Yet the tracking data, however sparse, reveals a crucial anomaly, a terrifying coincidence that must not be dismissed by political convenience. Lurvana paused, the silence stretching so tautly that the collective respiratory rhythm of the Vex delegation, a low, rhythmic shush-shush-shush, became the only sound in the chamber, a metronome counting down to potential disaster. The Scourge's projected trajectory, its axis of propagation, is directed with unnerving, perfect precision towards the Sol system. Specifically toward the 3rd orbital body, the world designated Sol III. The world our archives denote, with a chilling lack of pretense, as the most unstable, most biologically dangerous, and most paradoxically promising of all monitored deathworlds, Earth. A tremor ran through the chamber. The Vex delegation immediately erupted in a high-pitched, chaotic chorus of rapid oval. apping vocalizations, their six-limbed appendages flailing in a pantomime of distress, a biologically necessary purging of psychological overload. Executor Xylos pounded the dais with a massive, articulated forearm, the sound echoing like a death knell. Order, silence. Vex delegates, manage your psychoregulatory responses. Ambassador Lurvana, the correlation is noted, but the conclusion is utterly untenable. Are you suggesting this existential threat, this vessel of absolute annihilation, is a creation of the Sol III inhabitants, the species they term humanity? The skepticism was heavy, laced with a familiar, dangerous arrogance. The Alliance had studied humanity for less than 2 cycles, monitoring their chaotic, technologically nascent civilization from a safe, deep-cover distance. Their reports detailed creatures of shocking biological frailty, requiring constant atmospheric regulation, susceptible to environmental minor shifts, suffering from self-inflicted psychological distress, yet possessing an explosive, unpredictable rate of technological and cultural metastasis. They fought themselves constantly, built weapons of devastating internal planetary yield, and seemed fundamentally incapable of managing their own biosphere, yet they dreamed of the stars. The consensus was Deathworld potential but fundamentally underdeveloped. Ambassador Lurvana's veils ceased their shimmer, adopting a dull, obsidian opacity, the Cathar gesture of absolute seriousness. I am not suggesting they created it, Executor. I am suggesting the nature of their world. Their Deathworld categorization is the only variable that correlates with this anomaly. We know Deathworlds breed technological desperation and biological tenacity, but humanity is an outlier in the Deathworld taxonomy. Their ferocity is not simply predatory, it is philosophical. They are creatures who seem to derive strength from impossible odds, who institutionalize risk as a virtue, and who have consecrated the concept of a last stand into a cultural mythos. It is illogical counter-survival, but perhaps the scourge is drawn to a kindred instability. Perhaps it is a pre-human artifact, a relic of their deep past, or a cosmic beacon they have inadvertently activated through their primitive, clumsy forays into space, a consequence of their reckless curiosity. The Alliance's primary objective, stated within the Galactideme Protocol, is the containment of Deathworld variables. The proximity of the scourge to Sol III demands immediate, decisive action regarding both entities. The debate spiraled into a storm of political and existential fear. The Vex argued for immediate, aggressive quarantine of the entire Sol system, even a low-yield preemptive sterilization if the scourge crossed a certain threshold, citing the paramount safety of the Alliance. The Krill, ever pragmatic, argued for a sustained observation, risking a patrol or 2 to gather more data on the scourge's power source, hoping to reverse-engineer a defense. The Cathar pleaded for patience, urging a diplomatic overture to the Sol III inhabitants to see if they possessed hidden esoteric knowledge of the object's origin, a suggestion met with scorn and outright dismissal by the majority. To treat with a species that still utilized chemical propulsion and fragmented global governance, especially one that might have inadvertently summoned this terror, was seen as a sign of weakness and ethical lapse. The core of the fear was this: humanity was unpredictable. They defied the statistical models. They were too calm in the face of self-destruction and too volatile when united. They were the ultimate variable in the Alliance's meticulously controlled galactic neighborhood. Executor Xylos silenced the chamber again, his voice now a low, chilling command. We will dispatch a diplomatic observation cruiser, the Silent Sentinel, retrofitted with the Alliance's most advanced stealth and sensor array. Its objective will be twofold. First, to establish a tight vector monitor of the scourge at the absolute limit of its engagement range. If it chooses to engage, the vessel is forfeit, but the data must be transmitted. Second, it will establish contact with the dominant political and military authorities of Sol III. We will demand 2 things: a full accounting of any knowledge they possess regarding the Void Scourge, and a complete cessation of all their own nascent deep space activities. We will assess their compliance, their transparency, and their potential culpability. If they prove uncooperative, unstable, or if the Scourge utilizes their system for a catastrophic jump into core Alliance space, we will invoke the Protocol's ultimate provision: complete, immediate, irreversible quarantine. We cannot risk the stable polities for the sake of a single, chaotic Deathworld and the terror it seems to attract. The vote was cast through the crystalline network. The decision was unanimous, the terror overriding all political and cultural boundaries. The fate of Earth was now officially contingent upon the disposition of an unstoppable, apocalyptic vessel they had no knowledge of, and the interpretation of their fear-driven, arrogant Alliance observers. The journey of the Silent Sentinel was a passage through dread, the cruiser maintaining a deep-field quantum camouflage that made its existence a statistical improbability. Commander Vritan, a Krill tactical expert chosen for his unflappable psychological profile and complete lack of empathy for non-Krill life, monitored the twin projections in his command pit. One screen displayed the growing, terrible proximity of the Void Scourge, now a singularity of concentrated, destructive energy on the sensors, masked only by the sheer velocity of its transit. It was a spear of impossible physics, moving without detectable waste heat, gravity distortion, or even a measurable energy field beyond the transient annihilation signature it left in its wake. The other screen displayed the Sol system, a bright, stable yellow sun, orbiting which was the green-blue marble of Sol III, beautiful and deeply, fundamentally wrong. The density of its atmosphere, the volatility of its oceans, the sheer planetary concentration of biological warfare and tectonic instability. It was a world that should have died millennia ago, yet it thrived in a state of continuous energetic crisis. "Report on the Scourge's vector conformation," Vritan commanded, his voice a flat monotone. "Commander, its trajectory has undergone a slight, precise correction. It is now aligned not merely for transit through the Sol system, but for a close proximity flyby of Sol III's third orbital path," the Vex Sensorian reported, his appendages twitching. "The mathematical precision is unsettling. It is not an accident of physics. It is a deliberate choice of route." "And the activity around Sol III?" "Standard, unpredictable human activity. Sporadic, localized military maneuvers. Dense, self-choking atmospheric traffic. A surprisingly robust, though primitive, orbital infrastructure. No detectable military or scientific reaction to the Scourge's approach. They appear entirely unaware of the proximity of a galactic annihilation event." Vritan permitted himself a single, internal sigh of cultural superiority. They were blind, focused on their internal, microscopic squabbles, the arrogance of the fragile. He authorized the diplomatic hail, choosing the most authoritative, globally recognized human communication network. The Alliance's message was pure, synthesized high Krill, auto-translated for maximum semantic precision. A declaration of sovereignty, a statement of the Scourge's existential threat, and a demand for immediate, unconditional contact with their supreme military or scientific authority. The response was immediate, unexpected, and utterly calm. It did not come from their expected military channels or a political capital. It came from a small, isolated orbital platform, a construct that seemed almost deliberately minimalist, lacking the external armor plating and weapon ports of any Alliance vessel. The human voice, synthesized and transmitted across a universal quantum link, was a rich, smooth baritone, devoid of the panic, the fear, or the defensive posturing Vritan had anticipated. "This is Sol System Contact Command Designated Arbiter Station. We acknowledge your transmission, Alliance vessel. We have received and processed your data packet, including your assessment of the entity you term the Void Scourge. Our apologies for the lack of immediate visible alarm. Your assessment of its threat level is regrettably accurate. Please stand by for a secure, localized diplomatic exchange. We recommend you maintain your current stealth protocols. The entity is sensitive to high-energy emissions." The sheer professionalism of the reply sent a cold spike through Vritan's Krill composure. They were telling him to maintain stealth. They spoke of the Scourge with a chilling, detached familiarity. This was not the chaotic, disorganized response predicted. "They are attempting a deception," Vritan muttered, his stalks rigid. "A crude, desperate attempt to project capability, initiate the secure diplomatic frequency. I will conduct the exchange personally. Prepare the primary weapon banks for an immediate, non-compliant quarantine execution, should they prove hostile or delusional." The holographic projection of the human appeared in the center of Vritan's command pit. It was a male, his frame bipedal and aesthetically simple, dressed in a muted, functional gray uniform. His face was unremarkable by Krill standards, soft features, wide, expressive eyes, and a posture that spoke not of military rigidity, but of profound, centered stillness. The human's designation, displayed beneath his image in human script, read simply, "Delegate Kalen." Vritan did not offer a greeting, moving a meh. dietly to a position of demanded superiority. Delegate Kalen, I'm Commander Vretan of the Deathworld Alliance. Your system is now under our temporary protective authority due to the catastrophic risk posed by the Void Scourge. We have established that the Scourge is transiting through your space. We require an immediate, full, and transparent accounting of its origin, your knowledge of its weapon systems, and any strategic countermeasures your species has developed. We require absolute compliance. Any attempt at prevarication or deception will be interpreted as an act of aggressive instability, leading to immediate Alliance intervention. The human Kalen merely tilted his head slightly, a small, subtle gesture of contemplation that held an unnerving weight. His eyes, fixed on Vretan's projection, seemed to see through the tactical layers, the armor, the political arrogance, down to the core of the Krill's fear. Commander Vretan, we appreciate the severity of your concern and the commitment of the Alliance to protective authority. However, humanity has not requested, nor does it require external governance of its home system. We have been aware of the entity you term the Void Scourge. We refer to it as the Harbinger, for significantly longer than your Alliance has been tracking its current trajectory. We have been monitoring the spectral residues and the quantum wake of its transit for decades, following a pattern of deep space, extragalactic events that preceded its arrival in this sector. Vretan felt a cold, reptilian shiver. Decades. The Scourge had only entered the Alliance's effective sensor range a few cycles ago. That is an absurdity, human. Your species was barely capable of interstellar flight a decade ago. Your archives are fragmented and your science is nascent. You claim knowledge of an entity that defies our established understanding of physics. We claim no specific mastery of its physics, Commander, Kalen responded, his voice still level, utterly devoid of the defensive pride Vretan expected. We claim only observation and a certain philosophical preparedness for existential threats. Unlike the Alliance, which seems to analyze threats based on historical precedent and acceptable loss calculations, humanity, forged on a death world, analyzes them based on absolute worst-case singularity and the unacceptable nature of all loss. We have had centuries of experience with our own kind, where the ultimate destructive potential lies not in the largest weapon, but in the most profoundly irrational, unpredictable, and singularly committed actor. The Harbinger is precisely that, a singularity of destructive commitment. We have observed its pattern, not its technology. And what pattern is that, human? Vretan demanded, the question escaping him before he could reassert his political control. Its pattern is not random. It is seeking a specific energy signature. Your Alliance patrols were not engaged tactically. They were simply intercepting the primary vector of its search. The Harbinger does not waste energy on unnecessary random destruction. It is moving with focused, terrifying efficiency towards a single destination. Commander, the Alliance is correct. The Scourge's target is Sol III, but not for destruction. It is drawn to a faint, persistent, extremely ancient energy signature that has been broadcasting from a remote, geologically stable point beneath our planetary crust for over 70 millennia. A signature we have been unable to fully decode or neutralize. This was the first true reveal, and it struck Vretan with the force of an unshielded plasma discharge. A 70 millennia-old signal, buried on Earth. He felt a sudden, sickening realization. The Alliance's arrogance of observation had been their blindfold. They had dismissed Earth as a mere chaotic ecosystem, failing to consider the possibility of deep time, pre-human, or even extrasolar relics embedded within its turbulent history. Prevarication. He spat, his voice momentarily breaking its professional calm. This is a fabrication designed to shift culpability. We demand access to this signal, this relic, and all your associated data immediately. Kalen's expression remained unchanged, the calmness an unbearable contrast to the mounting panic in Vretan's command pit. Commander, the Alliance demands are noted. However, your demand for access, issued under a declaration of emergency authority, does not align with the reality of the situation. We have data, but it is not negotiable. It is a strategic necessity. Furthermore, we are not asking for your permission. We are offering an unprecedented collaboration born of necessity. We have developed the only known viable counter-strategy to the Harbinger's immediate objective. You are facing annihilation. We are offering the only path to survival. Vretan felt his command authority draining away, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar sense of helplessness. The human's composure was the true weapon. Counter-strategy? You, a species barely capable of interplanetary travel, possess a strategy against an entity that erased the mantle guard in an instant. Detail this counter-strategy, human, immediately. The Harbinger is not a weapon of war. It is a key seeking a lock, Kalen explained, his words now delivered with the measured, logical precision of a scientist detailing a complex theorem. The ancient signal is drawing it in. It is an artifact of cosmic scale, and the Harbinger is its activation mechanism. Our strategy is not to stop the Harbinger's transit, which is impossible due to its speed and unknown shielding. Our strategy is to perform a controlled, precise, ethical interference with the activation sequence. Kalen brought up a new holographic projection, a detailed, three-dimensional model of the Earth's geomagnetic field, overlaid with the deep subsurface energy source. Then, he overlaid a highly complex, geometrically perfect grid of energy conduits that seemed to spiderweb across the entire planetary surface and into orbit. An invisible, gargantuan infrastructure Vritan's sensors had completely failed to detect. This was the large-scale reveal. Humanity had not been simply fighting itself. It had been dedicating a significant, hidden portion of its global effort to constructing a planetary defense system unlike anything the Alliance had ever conceptualized, a purely ethical and containment-based grid. We cannot stop the Harbinger from reaching the signal, but we can ensure that when it does, the activation sequence results in a controlled, localized nullification of the artifact, rather than an uncontrolled, high-yield release of whatever cosmic force it represents, Kalen continued. This requires three things: absolute perfect synchronization of our global energy grid, a precise, timed, controlled gravitational distortion field at the point of surface impact, and most crucially, a momentary, high-yield energy decoy at a critical point along the Harbinger's final approach vector. A decoy capable of absorbing the entity's only known vulnerability, a momentary, infinitesimal energy drain required for its final phase lock onto the signal source. A decoy, Vritan repeated, the cold logic of the situation forcing him to process the impossible. You propose to sacrifice a vessel, a massive energy signature, to distract a weapon that vaporizes fleets. We propose to sacrifice one vessel, Commander, to save the entire sector, Kalen corrected, his gaze unwavering. And not just any vessel. It must be a ship capable of maintaining its structural and power integrity until the absolute final moment of impact. A vessel whose crew is psychologically capable of executing a zero-tolerance, zero-retreat maneuver. A last stand that is strategically necessary, not merely emotionally satisfying. We have calculated the necessary mass, shielding, and power core tolerance. It requires the sacrifice of a heavy cruiser, equipped with a high-density, rapidly deployable graviton focus array. Kalen paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle in the silent pit. It requires the sacrifice of a vessel that perfectly matches the specifications of your silent sentinel, and it requires a crew capable of accepting that logical, necessary fate. The air in the command pit crackled with profound, paralyzing tension. Vritan's four optical stalks focused on Kalen's image, the philosophical leap required for this strategy, an alien, terrifying concept. The Alliance logic was always survival first, minimize loss, retreat to rearm. The human logic was sacrifice for the ideal, maximize risk to nullify threat, last stand as strategic necessity. It was the ultimate, cold, ethical calculus of a Deathworld species that had somehow channeled its existential ferocity into profound altruism and terrifying, surgical courage. You are asking us to commit suicide, human, for a strategy you claim is predicated on an unknown artifact, Vritan stated, his voice now a low, dangerous growl. I am asking you to perform a logical necessity, Commander, Kalen replied, the weight of his calm reaching across the vastness of space. The Alliance's fleets are incapable of stopping the Harbinger. Your fear is paralyzing your tactical response. We are offering you a choice of necessary loss over catastrophic annihilation. The data required to implement the synchronicity of the gravitational array can be transmitted to your vessel within the next cycle. You have less than 3 cycles before the Harbinger reaches the critical decision point. Your Alliance preached ethical oversight of Deathworlds. Now, Commander, your ethics are being tested. The Harbinger is not waiting for your political consensus. Vritan cut the transmission immediately. His command pit was a maelstrom of fear and incomprehension. The Vex Sensorian was near physiological collapse, emitting desperate, continuous distress signals. The Krill tactical officer was locked in a logic loop, unable to reconcile the proposed strategy with Alliance survival protocols. This human was offering them the only chance, but at the cost of the Sentinel and Vritan's career and possibly his life. But Kalen's proposal held a terrifying, undeniable logic. The human had not lied. They had simply been operating on an entirely different scale of crisis management, one that viewed sacrifice not as a moral failing, but as a strategic tool. The scourge was terrifying, but the human's calm was the more profound existential threat to the Alliance's worldview. Vritan initiated the deep-field quantum link back to the high chamber, bypassing protocol, his mind a crystalline calculation of risk. He presented the human's strategy, the evidence of the hidden planetary grid, the ancient signal, and the brutal, logical requirement for the silent Sentinel's controlled sacrifice. The response was not immediate political condemnation. It was a profound, unprecedented silence. The Krill, the Cathar, and the Vex were unified in their fear and their dawning comprehension of their fundamental error. They had underestimated humanity's stability, not its weakness, but its terrifying ability to remain perfectly stable and ethical while staring into the face of absolute oblivion. Executor Xylos's voice, when it finally returned, was strained, heavy with the weight of the Alliance's history. Commander Vritan, we have analyzed the human data package. The spectral signature of the buried artifact is confirmed to be non-alliance, non-local, and possesses a power profile that aligns with a complete, immediate, and catastrophic rupture of the localized space-time continuum upon activation. The human strategy, while relying upon an act of ultimate commitment, is mathematically the only probability of success that exceeds zero. The Alliance is now entering into an unprecedented, temporary, and entirely necessary strategic alliance with the species-designated Sol III. Commander, you have your orders. The survival of the Alliance now rests on the execution of humanity's last stand. The magnitude of the statement, the admission of philosophical and tactical inferiority, was a moment that would reshape the Alliance's history forever. The final cycles of the Silent Sentinel were a strange, slow descent into the inevitable. The ship was no longer a symbol of Alliance arrogance. It was a calibrated instrument, a necessary component in a vast, planetary machine built by a species they had so casually dismissed. Delegate Kalen, now in continuous, direct communication, guided Vritan and his crew through the complex procedures required to recalibrate the cruiser's main reactor for a high-yield, targeted gravitational implosion, a procedure so risky it had never been theorized in Alliance labs. Commander Vritan, the human concept of a last stand is not about defiance in the face of death, is it? Vritan asked, his 4 optical stalks focused on Kalen's holographic image, the man radiating a calm that felt like a challenge to the universe's chaos. It is a strategic maneuver, Commander, Kalen confirmed, his expression one of somber understanding. It is the moment when all variables are known and the price is calculated, accepted, and paid without hesitation, in service of an ideal larger than the individual. It is not an end. It is a necessary, precise function in the larger mechanism of survival. Every biological process of a Deathworlder is tuned for the ultimate moment of risk, the perfect nexus of danger and opportunity. We merely chose to apply that ferocity to ethical defense, rather than aggression. We perceived your ferocity as internal chaos. We were deeply wrong. Vritan admitted, the admission tasting like ash on his vocal membranes. Perception is a mirror, Commander. You projected your fears onto our volatility. The Harbinger is now entering the final, high-velocity phase of its approach. Our planetary grid is fully charged and synchronized. Our gravitational distortion arrays are locked onto the impact coordinates. Your vessel, Commander, is the final, crucial component of the entire operation. The projection of the Harbinger on the main view screen was no longer a phantom energy signature. It was a dark, impossibly smooth, monolithic object, a geometry that seemed to absorb light and hope, slicing through the outer system with a disregard for physics. It was beautiful and utterly terrifying, a silent testament to a scale of technology the Alliance could not fathom. We have initiated the countdown for the final gravitational pulse synchronization, Kalen stated. Commander, at T-3 minutes, you will divert all non-essential power to the forward graviton focus array and commence the primary engine overload sequence. At T-1 minute, you will decloak and broadcast a high-intensity, oscillating N. Urgy signature on the dedicated frequency. This will be the decoy. You must maintain this signal for 35 seconds precisely. That window is all we require. Vretan looked at his skeletal, exhausted crew, their faces a mixture of professional focus and profound, accepted dread. They were krill, bred for logic and survival, now committing the ultimate act of illogic, calculated self-destruction, guided by the very species they were sent to judge. Acknowledged, Delegate Kalen. We will hold the decoy pulse for the specified duration. The silent sentinel will fulfill its function. The 3-minute countdown became an eternity. Vretan's internal chronometer was the only thing that felt real. He watched the Harbinger grow in the viewscreen, its size dwarfing the planet behind it. A single ship, the most dangerous entity they had ever faced, heading for a final, catastrophic collision course with a planet they had dismissed. At T-3, Vretan executed the command. The Sentinel's internal lights flickered, the immense power draw diverting, and a low, painful thrumming filled the command pit as the graviton array charged to catastrophic levels. The ship was no longer a vessel, it was a bomb. T-1 minute, Commander. Decloak and initiate decoy broadcast. Kalen's voice was a calm presence in the maelstrom. Executing, Vretan confirmed. The silent sentinel dropped its deep field camouflage. In the sudden cold light of the Sol system, the cruiser was revealed, a solitary, defiant speck of Alliance technology. Immediately, a beam of pure, focused energy, oscillating rapidly, shot from its forward array, the decoy pulse. The Harbinger's trajectory, which had been perfectly linear, shifted. Not violently, not with a burst of power, but with an infinitesimal logical correction. It had detected the larger, more chaotic energy signature of the Sentinel's imploding core, mistaking it for the sudden activation of the ancient relic. The Scourge, the entity of perfect destructive logic, had been fooled by the ultimate act of irrational commitment. It focused its attention, and its immense, unseen energy drain toward the silent Sentinel. Vretan watched the energy signature of the Harbinger lock onto his vessel. He felt the phantom touch of its approach, a cold, sickening sensation of systemic energy decay as the Scourge prepared to erase the vessel. 35 seconds, human. The drain is catastrophic. We are losing internal containment. Hold the line, Commander. 30 seconds. Sol III synchronization achieved. Kalen's voice was sharp, a commander in the heat of battle, yet still calm. The human planetary grid activated. A web of faint, violet light, invisible to the naked eye but overwhelming to sensors, enveloped the planet, flowing into the critical subterranean coordinate. The controlled gravitational distortion field initiated, a precise, calculated ripple of local spacetime, intended to act as a buffer and a focusing mechanism for the Harbinger's arrival. 15 seconds. Hold the core, Commander. This is the apex of the risk. Vretan stared at the oncoming monolith, its scale now filling the viewscreen. He felt no fear, only the cold, hard logic of his purpose. He was a variable being optimized for the greater good. It was the Deathworld philosophy made manifest. 10 seconds, core breach imminent. Now, Commander, graviton focus array deployment. Vretan didn't need the order. He slammed his manipulator into the final command nexus. The silent Sentinel's core imploded, not in a chaotic explosion, but in a precise, controlled burst of high-density gravitational focus, directed not at the Harbinger, but at the exact point of the Scourge's momentary energy drain. The final seconds were a frozen tableau of cosmic forces. The Harbinger, its energy focused on the Sentinel, collided with the gravity distortion field produced by the human grid and simultaneously impacted the self-annihilation of the Alliance vessel. The sheer, overwhelming energy of the Sentinel's implosion provided the perfect, catastrophic interference. There was no explosion. There was only a blinding, silent rupture. The Harbinger vanished, its energy signature not merely dissipated but nullified, a moment of absolute perfect cancellation. The ancient signal beneath Earth's crust immediately ceased its broadcast, silenced by the Human Alliance intervention. The Sol system was silent, safe, the catastrophe averted by a single, focused act of suicidal courage. The aftermath was a state of profound, philosophical silence in the Alliance high chamber. The loss of the silent Sentinel and its crew was marked not by mourning, but by a sudden, terrifying shift in the political and cultural center of the Alliance. The species of the Deathworld Alliance, conditioned to view self-preservation as the ultimate virtue, had been saved by the ultimate act of ethical sacrifice from a species they had owned. Irestimated. Weeks passed in agonizing, deliberate review. The analysis of the event was not merely technical, it was a psychological exegesis of humanity. Their chaos was merely the raw energy of a species constantly optimizing its survival mechanisms. Their fragility was offset by their terrifying psychological robustness. Their willingness to commit to a last stand was not a desperate gamble, but the foundation of an ethical framework that valued the collective good or a grand ideal above the individual's immediate survival. They were the ultimate logical beings because their logic included the necessary price. Executor Xylos addressed the reformed, humbled council, the lights of the chamber now subdued, the atmosphere heavy with dawning realization. We made an error of assumption. We assumed that the chaos of a death world must lead to instability. Humanity, Sol III, proved that its crucible forged not only tenacity, but a profound, necessary ethics. They forced us to confront the true definition of a last stand, not a futile gesture, but a precisely timed, strategically sound, ultimate commitment to a higher cause. Their logic saved us. Ambassador Lurvana, her veils now a respectful, deep black, nodded slowly. The Alliance will now enter a permanent, equitable, strategic pact with humanity. We will share our deep space knowledge. They will share the philosophical and tactical lessons of the last stand. The Galactideme Protocol must be rewritten. It must not be a containment policy. It must be a treaty of mutual respect, for the Deathworlders' perspective is now revealed as an ultimate guarantor of galactic stability. But the ultimate reflection, the realization that dwarfed even the terror of the Void Scourge, came late on a solitary, quiet cycle of deep analysis. The human delegate, Kalen, now formally recognized as an Alliance dignitary, transmitted a single, short message to the Alliance's central data network, a file containing the final, raw spectral data from the moment the Harbinger was neutralized. The data was immediately flagged as anomalous. The Void Scourge had not merely been destroyed by the gravitational implosion, it had been unlocked. Its structure, an impossibly dense, monolithic hull, was designed not for war, but for transit and activation. At the moment of its nullification, its core emitted a final, momentary burst of energy, not a death scream, but a signature, a unique quantum key that propagated outward toward the galactic edge at FTL velocity. The Alliance's Deep Space Sentinel network, now hyperalert, detected a sudden, massive energy spike at a remote, utterly dark sector of the galaxy, a region previously dismissed as a barren, intercluster void. The signature of the Harbinger's final pulse had been received. The data was compiled, modeled, and projected into the high chamber. It was a single, holographic schematic, centered in the space previously occupied by the Scourge's terrifying crimson marker. It was not a ship. It was not a weapon. It was an object of such immense, incomprehensible scale that the assembled delegates could not process its dimensions. The projection showed a massive Dyson sphere-scale construct, not built around a star, but built around a central dark matter void, a vast, segmented, spiraling megastructure, ancient beyond all Alliance reckoning. This structure, illuminated only by the faint, cold light of distant galaxies, was not dead or abandoned. It was, in this final, terrifying moment, stirring. It was a galactic gateway, a colossal, abandoned frontier deployment portal built by a precursor civilization whose technology dwarfed all known science. The Void Scourge was merely the key sent to activate the gate, and the signal beneath Earth was the coordination beacon. The structure was not a threat. It was an invitation, an open door, and now the door was ajar. A deep, low-frequency hum emanated from the projection, the sound propagating through the chamber with the force of 1,000,000 colliding stars. It was a message, translated instantaneously by the Alliance's advanced AI, rendered into pure high krill for the assembled delegates. The message was simple, terrifying, and profoundly hopeful, a challenge from the deep cosmos, a final, unimaginable twist that eclipsed the terror of the Harbinger. Initiation sequence complete. Sector Gamma-Novan Frontier Lock released. The path beyond is open. Await transversal authority. Warning, beyond this gate the true threats await. Only those with the will to execute the ultimate stand may pass. The high chamber fell into a silence even more profound than before. They had defeated the localized threat, only to realize they were standing on the precipice of the true frontier, facing not a battle, but a vast, unimaginable cosmological challenge. The Deathworld Alliance, so proud of its containment and control, was now faced with a galactic horizon defined by the unknown. Executor Xylos gazed. At the massive, swirling portal projection, his 4 optical stalks now perfectly steady, a new resolve hardening the old political fear. He looked toward the projection of Sol III, the beautiful blue marble that had hidden a profound secret, and forged the courage to face absolute logic with ethical sacrifice. He understood, finally, the true power of humanity. It was not their guns or their speed. It was their willingness to stand at the final edge and accept the necessary logical price of existence. They were the only ones truly prepared for the vast, terrifying emptiness beyond the gate, for they were the only species who had institutionalized the concept of the last stand, the ultimate ethical commitment. The Alliance, saved by the Deathworlders' paradoxical logic, now had a choice: retreat to the comforting fear of the past, or step through the cosmic gate alongside the species that had proven itself capable of the ultimate sacrifice. The fear was still present, but now it was tempered by the cold, fierce resolve of a Deathworld Alliance finally understanding the true value of its newest, most dangerous, and most necessary member. The path to the stars was not through conquest. It was through the shared acceptance of the ultimate, final risk, a unity forged in the heat of Earth's last stand.